So, why do hierarchies disturb my soul so much? I don't think it's because I dislike leadership or even like the concept of authority. I think it's because hierarchies train us to believe that some humans are more worthy than others, are more innately worthy, or have more value than others. And that belief quietly shapes almost everything about our society.
I'm Rachel, and I have fun doing so many things like playing, singing, dancing, painting, filming, and many more. Cause I'm a Mosaic soul. I'm proud to be me, being both divine and free.
So, I really want to break down why hierarchies disturb my soul, and I'll probably be exploring topics like this and more in more depth on this channel moving forward because it ties to the way that I think, the way that I move, the way that I create as a multidisciplinary artist, and the way that I see the world and how that shapes the art and the work that I do in the world. So, the first reason that I really feel disturbed by hierarchies is that hierarchies manufacture this sense of scarcity, right? In my purview, in my way of seeing the world, I believe that the earth is rather abundant and it's naturally abundant. You see it out in with trees, with the way that the plants naturally reproduce themselves, with, water and things of that nature. And the issues with hierarchies is that it creates this sense of scarcity because hierarchies decide who gets access to the abundance that was naturally there before humans decided to muck everything up, right? And it creates scarcity because there's this hoarding of resources that happens instead of a stewardship of resources, which I feel like a lot of our, ancestors before ancestors were more in tune with the earth and more in tune with stewardship and connection, right? With the world that we live on. I feel like hierarchies have disturbed that natural order and has created this sense of scarcity on the planet, which doesn't actually need to be. And even with the advent of technologies, you would think, okay, now we have more technologies that we can actually build technology in tandem with the planet. That's actually not what's going on. A lot of times technology is just driving what's already happening, which is the natural greed that's like in our society, and that creates more of a division between us and the natural world that we're a part of, right? And so it really disturbs my soul because it creates this false sense of scarcity. Not to say that scarcity doesn't exist. There are instances in nature, of course, where scarcity does exist. But in general, I think scarcity doesn't exist as much as we think it does. And we've been indoctrinated to believe that it does. And resources become concentrated instead of like shared, right? So instead of this, like, everyone has food, clothing, shelter, water, and the basic needs met, we are clamoring in our modern day society for things that I feel like were, God given, not to be religious because I'm not religious at all, but I feel like, if we had to look at it from this universe, this infinite intelligence that has created all of this, whatever that we're a part of, is naturally abundant. And yet, because of hierarchies, because of all these different isms, we have a tendency to experience the lack of abundance, right? And scarcity is often created through ownership and control and domination, right? Not simply because resources are limited, right? And so, for example, when you think about the trees, or when you think about the ecosystems and things of the world that are naturally there, before we had land ownership, before we had, states and countries and lines between these things, before we had division and stake in the land and saying that this is mine, a lot of the natural world was more of, we were interconnected with the world, right? And so if there was a peach tree in this section of the land, there was peach and pecans and all this stuff, there would be, another batch of orchard or something over there, and there would be more of a harmonious, like, interconnectedness of sharing and bartering and things of that nature that were there. But because of hierarchies, capitalism, colonialism, elitism, and classism, there has been this division of resources that were naturally abundant, right? And there's even laws that are created to create this lack society, when there's been so much research on this. Like, I'm not the first person to talk about this. Ecologist, economists, all of these type of people have done these types of studies, like the even just here in America, like the billions of dollars worth of food that we throw away every year just because of greed or because of keeping up with perceptions of brand, perceptions and things of that nature, when we literally still have people who are struggling to feed their families here in America, right? Not just overseas, like here in America, right? So things of that nature. This is why I don't really like hierarchies. It's like it doesn't logically make sense when when the resources are there. It's just like, why not share it? And that's because I think hierarchies just create this like hoarding and ownership and control and domination of resources that I feel are actually naturally belong to all of us. Now, I'm not saying that I don't believe that we should get rid of land ownership and all of that stuff. I don't know what the solutions are, but I'm just telling you why I don't see it right with my soul. Okay. Second reason I don't like hierarchies is hierarchies separate people into higher and lower. Like, if you saw my other video, I naturally believe that we're all equal. I believe that we all have, you know, access to the divine source within us, and we are all fractals of source. And so I don't see anyone as higher or lower. Now, I do see people as stupider and smarter, but that doesn't make that person who's stupider less than the person who might be smarter, right? So like with the separation of higher lower, we have like the rich versus the poor, we have the boss versus the employee, right? The noble versus the commoner, right? The colonizer versus the colonized, right? The white versus black, right? White supremacy, right? Citizen versus immigrant, right? Successful versus failure, right? Yeah, like the underlying message behind all of these things is that some lives are worth more than others. Therefore, we can eliminate the lives that we deem less worthy. And that's what we find in our society right now. Wars, genocide, it's happening all over again. It happens like every cycle. Just study history, is because some people believe that their lives are worth more than other people's lives. And that therein lies, to me, the mental disorder of our society. Because how do you believe, if we're all fractals of source, right? Which most people don't believe, even these people who consider themselves to be God-fearing or Christian have this sort of hierarchies because they believe that people who do not believe in their God or their, whatever deity figure is less than them. And it's just like, how does that even rock with, that just doesn't logically make sense to me. Like, the logic is just missing at every turn. So yeah, the whole higher and lower thing, it just doesn't resonate for me. It doesn't make sense with the natural order of things when you look at nature. Like, there's definitely, there's definitely like predator versus prey, right, out in nature and things of that nature. But I wouldn't say that the prey is less than the predator. It's just like there's like a symbiosis kind of thing, right? There's a synergistic thing that happens in Earth where certain things like are eliminated, right? But like I don't necessarily like, I think humans have like distorted these natural occurrences in nature and have distorted it to the highest degree to where it creates harm and havoc for majority of us, right? Even the so-called rich or the colonized or the nobleman or the boss or the people who are considered higher are all suffering. I mean, just look at the happiness rates on all the countries, right? Some of the most highly developed countries are some of the most miserable countries, right? Like when we look at the happiness score, you know what I mean, in terms of like that scale that they do when they look at people's happiness across the whole continent, the whole world, right? It's like the countries and the nations that are the most globalized or the most colonized or the most advanced technologically, or all of this stuff is not necessarily the happiest, right? It's because a lot of times we are living in hierarchies that separate us from our divinity, that separate us from nature, the natural world that we're a part of, and that separate us from the truth of who we are, which is that we're like God manifest in human form, and we're actually all interconnected. We're not. So when you harm another person, you're actually like, when you're pointing your finger at one person, you actually have 4 more fingers pointed back at yourself. So it's like that, like there's a ripple effect that happens. And I don't, people who are in places of power and, leadership, I would just say domination, don't tend to understand the ripple effects of their actions. The third reason why I don't really like hierarchies is hierarchies disconnect us from nature, right? I've already been pointing this throughout, but like nature doesn't rank trees by importance, right? Rivers don't charge admission. Humans do, right? I mean, I've been seeing lately, they've been like natural parks and things of that nature that used to be free, they're actually charging you admission to go to. Like, this is insanity. Like, people can't even go out in nature and have rest, right? We can't even sit on a park bench for free anymore, right? Like, it's becoming really ridiculous now. Bees don't own flowers, right? They pollinate them, right? Forests function through interdependence. There's an interdependence that happens naturally in nature, right? And humans created systems of ownership that often override stewardship, that override this natural ecological, synergistic symbolism, symbiosis that is found in nature, right? And because of our so-called advanced brains, we're literally killing ourselves at every turn. It's just hilarious to me. I have to laugh because it's just so sad if I don't laugh. It's just like, we're not as smart as we think we are, just as a species, because it's like, if we were smart, especially the people who are consider themselves leaders, they would do things that benefit the whole of the planet, not just themselves, but that benefit the whole of the planet. Like, even the whole ideology of us trying to race to space, right? Or the race to who's going to own AI, and that's a whole nother topic. But like, all these things, right? If we were smart, we would say, instead of trying to figure out how to get out of Earth, why don't we learn how to be better stewards of the Earth that we have, right? Instead of graping the Earth, right? We have to learn how to work in tandem with its natural systems, right? And this is about like returning to our natural state of being, our some of our old and ancient ways, and even bringing those to the modern systems of being interconnected with the earth and the nature around us versus being separate from it, right? The fourth reason why I hate hierarchies, or why they disturb my soul, is that hierarchies reward extraction, right? So, taking instead of caring, right? Profit over people, right? Profit over ecosystems. It's all about profit and greed and power and expansion, right? Profit over future generations. Right? The goal shifts from stewardship to accumulation, right? To expansion, to domination, right? And I feel like, because hierarchies reward extraction, it's literally like a parasite. Hierarchies is like it's an extension of parasitism, if that's a word, right? And you see this in every industry, from the oil industry to even bottled waters. Like, everything is all about extraction, right? Extraction of resources, to the computer industries, to the clothing industries, to every freaking industry, right? Pretty much is based on extraction versus harmony and stewardship with the resources that we have, right? And it's really sad, because it's like, we're so smart and yet so dumb. Like, we're the most smartest, dumbest, we're like the most stupidest intelligent species on the planet. Seriously, it's like, these are so simple to me, but it's like, common sense isn't really common on our planet. But this is why hierarchies disturb my soul. So it's like, instead of, and back to like the whole taking versus caring, there's like this energy of extraction that happens even on an interpersonal situation. Like, we're always like garnered to be like in this transactional energy, right? I noticed this like probably 10 years ago, when I started getting into, over 10 years ago, when I was in relationships, and how a lot of relationships, whether platonic or romantic, are transactional. And a lot of times it's because we are raised and indoctrinated into these hierarchies that teach us that we have to, it's survival of the fittest, right? If you aren't keeping up with the Joneses, then you're less than. If you're not making a certain amount of money, then your life has less value than this person who has more money than you, right? If you aren't doing this type of work, then your value in the world is less, right? And so therefore your life means less, right? I mean, we have countless movies that show us this, right? Remember that, I can't remember the movie with a time with Justin Timberlake or something, and they all had to clock in, to get enough time on their lives. And if they didn't clock in, then they would just conk out, because they had something like programmed in them or something that would, if they didn't work enough to have enough time, then their time would be up, kind of thing. Like, this is literally the direction that we're going in. They're going to start charging us for air pretty soon. Like, you're using too much air. We got to take it. Like, we're getting to like some dire times up in this. Yeah, it's crazy. Okay, and then the fifth reason why hierarchies disturb my soul is that hierarchies create artificial competition. I feel like there's natural competition on the planet, but not in the way that humans have created it, right? Humans have taken higher competition and distorted it to high heavens, right? So there's this constant comparison mode where we're always looking at this person, Betsy and Susie and Joe and John and, Qualim, and what they got and what they're wearing and what kind of car they're driving and what kind of, watch they're riding in, or what kind of this status seeking, this status seeking society, right? And everybody's dead inside, but they got the new Audi, they got the new, Bugatti, they got the new whatever that people are into. I don't even know clearly. It's just like but it's just like this status seeking winning at life kind of, mirage, right? The Maya that people live in is just hilarious to me, but also it's very saddening, because it's like the very thing that you're seeking and these outside status symbols is actually living inside of you. Like, what do you plan on getting out of that, right? Which is, the way my brain works, is it's like what you're really seeking is recognition, is feeling seen, heard, that one of the things on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Of feeling seen, heard, of belonging, right? Of feeling actualized, right? All of those things don't need status symbols. We don't need to have, children working, under the age of 13 until their fingers bleed, because you have child slave workers, sewing your clothes in the middle of the night, because we have these beautiful malls, shopping malls in America, right? Like the last time I hung out with a friend, and we went to the mall, it was very disturbing to my soul. And I was having like this sort of like, not mental breakdown, but it was just like really hurting me, because I remember going to the mall with my parents growing up, and we would always go to the mall almost like every weekend, and it's like the thing that you do, but when you wake up to the systems of the world, it's hard to see things like this, because what goes on behind closed doors in order for America to look the way that it does, right? In order for us to have all these, nice, high-end this and that clothing stores and these type of, fill in the blank, somebody somewhere was taken from. Someone is being currently extracted from, whether it's their time, their resources, their land, or their labor, right? So like this beautiful thing that we all are adoring and going after, and all these status symbols, always comes at the cost of someone else's extraction, right? And when I learned that, it just like, I don't know, materialism just fell flat for me. Like that isn't like the thing in life. Not to say that I don't like nice things. I do like nice things, but not at the cost of my soul, right? Not at the cost of this that I am, right? Because at the end of the day, you can't take that ish with you. You can't take that shit with you. Like you gonna die, and all this shit gonna be left behind, and what is your soul gonna have from it? You know what I mean? So for me, as a comrade for everyone's souls, that I'm fighting for people's souls, it's just like I just don't resonate with this whole artificial competition, right? Because also there's the aspect of competition, which is like this fear of falling behind, right? That I recently got over, right? This fear of like trying to keep up with the Joneses, or feeling like you haven't won in life. And that's because of all these status seeking like markers that we've inherited and indoctrinated into. And it's like, how are you behind? I don't even like the term late bloomer. Like I used to resonate with it at one point, and I can see like the positive aspect of it, but like it doesn't even resonate for me anymore, because it's like, how can you be a late bloomer when you are blooming in your own time? That doesn't logically make sense, right? You can't fall behind in your own soul's trajectory, like when you see the like idiocracy of like how humans operate on the planet, it's just like, yeah, it just doesn't resonate. So yeah. And then like people become like competitors instead of collaborators. We no longer collaborate. It's like, you thinking that you're making a new friend, but really they're jealous of you and they're secretly want what you have, right? Whether it's like being next to you because you have this type of boyfriend, or being next to you because you own this type of house, or being next to you because you think, you dress this type of way, or, you know what I mean? It's like all this like, like wanting up on people, or trying to get something that the other person has, versus it being like this collaboration, versus this being like this like sovereign connections, right? It's very distorted human interactions that I just find to be very displeasing in a lot of ways. Now, I definitely have some genuine connections in my life, but the ones that I've had to release is a lot of times it's because of this whole hierarchies that happen, right? Where elitism happens. I remember this one time, right? I'll tell this quick story. I was dropping off this young lady, and she was African American descent. And we were having a nice chat, but she had some popcorn in her hand, right? And she had a bag of popcorn and some other food, and her popcorn was like spilling all over my floor in my back seats. Now, mind you, I hadn't had a chance to like vacuum all the way back there, but it was just like basic dirt from people's shoes, you know. It wasn't like dirt all over my chairs and shit like that, right? Anyways, this lady proceeded to leave her popcorn droppings, and I was like, "Oh, ma'am, could you get your, popcorn stuff?" And the stuff was falling from your back. And she's like, "Oh, okay." And I was like, "Okay." And I was just looking at her because I had pulled up to drop her off at her whatever place. I think it was like some Jaguar place or whatever for her to get her car. And as she got out, as she's like cleaning the bag, she gets angry at me because I'm like, "Oh, you missed a few things over here," because I did point it out. And I know that could be like nitpicking, but it was like, I already have to clean out my car. You just dropped all this food on my floor. It was okay if it would be okay if it was like, dirt from your shoes. I would have to clean up anyways. But it's like popcorn from your bag that's like leaking all over my floor. So I'm like, "Could you get this and this?" I just pointed to one thing, and she just flipped out and like started getting angry. She was talking on the phone with someone, and she's like, talking about me to whoever she's on the phone with, right? And she basically starts belittling me and demeaning me, talking about, I can't even remember what she said. It pissed me the F off. I can't even remember because I've gotten over it. But she said something that was very belittling and demeaning to me. Now, this is a Black woman, right? And she just basically pulled the elitism card on me, like, "Oh, she's going into this Jaguar store to get her Jaguar or whatever, and I'm just a lowly Lyft driver, who safely took her from her point A to point B. And without me, like, you would be not to your destination." So anyways, I just thought that was so interesting. It was like how people, even of my same complexion or even of my same, ethnicity, will use hierarchies to like feel better about themselves just because I simply asked you to pick up something that you dropped. Like, it was so crazy. So anyways, that was just one example of like hierarchies that I've experienced. Like the effects of hierarchies is like, wow, people really look down on people who have honest work, for of which, if honest workers didn't exist, and I'm going to do a whole another breakdown on this video, if honest workers didn't exist, most of us wouldn't be alive, right? The people who slaved away, who, built this freaking country, were honest workers, right? This whole like white collar work that we now have over because of like what the 21st century stuff wasn't a thing until the 21st century. Most of our ancestors worked in hard labor. Not to say that we didn't have like, politicians or, doctors and lawyers and all that stuff, but most people didn't fall in those categories. Most people had work of honest means. And so the fact that people have this elitism thing, like, "Oh, you haven't made it unless you've made it," it's like, I don't know. I've never had that, even when I was making decent money, because I come from a family of, people of decent means, and who, from all different types of family, from people who have made it to millionaires to people who are everyday workers and stuff like that. So I've just never, people are people, you're all gonna die. We're all gonna die. No one's getting out of this bitch alive. So I don't know, understand why people think that they're better than anybody, because at the end of the day, bitch, you gonna die. So like, why do you think that you're better than me? Like, you know what I mean? So I don't know. That's just how my mind works. Hierarchies to disturb my soul. Competition is irrelevant and stupid, and status seeking things just don't resonate for me. Now, am I saying that I'm not striving for more things and I'm not trying to build a better life for myself? No, of course I am, but it's like not at the cost of my soul. Okay. The sixth reason why hierarchies disturb my soul is that hierarchies normalize exploitation. And I've already kind of mentioned this with extraction, but the way that it shows up in our society is that cheap labor is so huge, right? Wage inequality or wage theft happens all the time, especially with white and Black people, right? Like, what is it, like Black women make 62 cents to every $1 that a white person makes, and then white women, I think, make like something like 80. Don't quote me on the stats, but it's like 80% or something of every $1 that a white man makes, type shit. Like that kind of shit. Like that still is going on in 2026, like in all industries, right? Colonialism, slavery, right? Environmental destruction, right? All of this is exploitation, aspects of exploitation, right? The belief that someone else's suffering is an acceptable cost to your wealth, right? And this is where we start getting into the territory of how rich do people need to be versus like, because I feel like wealth is fine. I'm not anti-capitalism, but I'm not pro-capitalism either. I do believe in free commerce because like as a person who's a business owner, I do believe that it's great that I can like go start an art business and like sell my art to people who want it, right? But I don't believe then being like, okay, well, I'm, a trillionaire, so I'm going to extract this country for all their free cheap labor and harm the people and steal all their resources. Like this, I don't believe in exploitation. It just doesn't resonate for me. Like, why can't we build systems that are based on win-win situations, right? That's to me makes more logical sense, right? Why can't we build systems that are win-win versus win-lose? In hierarchies, there's always this win-lose thing, right? There's always this win-lose, right? And the people who lose always end up suffering, and the people who think they won actually are all so miserable at the top too. A lot of times, I've picked up lots of people, talked to lots of people, so I know that this whole hierarchy thing where we normalize exploitation doesn't make anybody happier. It really doesn't. Like, at the end of the day, like, you might think that you're happy, but like at the end of the day, you're seeking, like you're thrill seeking. Like I was listening to this one video a while ago where they're like the new drive or the new like impetus behind the luxury market isn't just luxury items, it's luxury experiences, right? Because people are waking up realizing that I don't want just this new, handbag or new car or type of house. Like I want to have lived experiences. And you know why we're chasing after that? It's because we want to feel alive. And you don't necessarily need to like go fly around in a jet to feel alive. Like you can do those things, but it's like, how is it like, you know what I mean? I don't know. This is nuance, but I'm going to break this down in more episodes to come later. Okay, and the seventh reason why hierarchies really disturb my soul is that hierarchies disconnect us from our humanity, right? I feel like it disconnects us from our divinity as well, right? So people become titles instead of people, especially here in America. Like I've heard other people's, testaments about like when they visit other countries and stuff like that. But like when a country is like super Americanized, like your title and what you do is like way more important than who you are as a person, right? So wealth becomes, right, this confused with your worth, right? How much money you have in your bank account states how much value you have in the marketplace, in the world, because everything is productized. Your time, your effort, your energy, this slave labor kind of country that we've come from has not ended. Like slavery has just metamorphosized into a different form, right? Like instead of having, black people out in the slave fields, we've now become all like indentured slave workers in the form of capitalism, right? Because to me, it doesn't make sense that we even have to like, not to say that we shouldn't work. I'm not anti-work because even our ancestors work, but it's like to work just in order to live. I feel like it just doesn't make sense when there's so much abundance on the planet, right? And this disconnects us from our humanity because we stop seeing people for the valuable, infinite, like divine beings that they are versus, what can you do for me? And I'm not saying not to have discernment because, a lot of people are asleep. So of course you need to have discernment on who gets in and out of your circle. But it like in general, like that's how we see people in America. That's how we see people in this sort of colonized, place, industrialized place, right? It's like success becomes confused with moral superiority, right? Like we think that a successful person is actually morally superior. And it's like, look at our leaders now. Look at who's running our countries now, right? Like, are they really morally superior? So like, I don't know. I feel like it's kind of like obvious what the answer to that is. The eighth reason that hierarchies disturb my soul is that my nervous system rejects hierarchies, literally. I've never resonated with because I'm above you kind of energy, right? Because I said so, or because like, when parents do that thing, because I said so, or because this thing, or like when your boss says, because this is the way that it's done, or, you know what I mean? Like domination, control, those things don't resonate for me, right? Like, I've always been drawn to horizontal relationships. I've always been like drawn to relationships that are equitable, that are equal, where we are meeting face to face and we're talking to each other on the same plane, right? I've always loved seeing how, awakened or like, aware parents talk to their children's like they're on the same plane versus talking down to the kid. Like I always hated that when like adults would do that to me when I was a kid. I always liked people because I was so smart and intellectual, and I'm like, just talk to me like I understand, because I probably do if you just give me a chance. So it's like I don't like when people talk down to each other. I don't like when there's this energy of like, innate I'm right, you're wrong kind of energy. I try to like be open-minded for the most part, but whatever. That's a whole other topic. Yeah. So for me, mutual respect feels more natural than dominance, right? Whether you're, a trash can picker up person, whether you are someone who is a doctor or a surgeon, whether you work in the government or you work, whatever, it doesn't matter who you are. Labels and all these things don't matter to me. Like, to me, I see you as a human being who has value, right? The fact that, even when I see it here in Atlanta where I live, where people are literally like running people over, like, how many times I've seen, like, I remember one time I got into a car accident probably like 3 years ago, and it wasn't my fault. But I was at the local hospital, and someone had, like, I was sitting in like one of those hospital beds waiting for the doctor to come examine me or whatever. And the guy who was sitting in front of me was kind of like complaining. He was an older, dark-skinned gentleman. And he was complaining and kind of bitching and moaning. He was like, they ran me over. These MFers ran me over. And so basically this guy, this elderly gentleman, elderly black guy, was telling me how basically he looked homeless. He looked like he didn't have a home. But he was saying how people on the street ran him over, literally left him for dead in the street, and he had to claw his way to get help so he could get seen, And I'm like, really, people? Are we that freaking like so disconnected from our humanity that we're gonna run somebody over and leave them dead in the street? Like, we don't have, like, like, we can't even like you saw me get like disturbed about people running over the goose. Of course, if people are running over geese, they don't care. They don't respect human life. You know what I mean? Especially black human lives. Like, oh my god, I can break this down in so many. This is gonna be a whole fucking okay. Anyways, let's move on to the next topic. Because that's just a whole nother video. But yeah, to me, collaboration feels more natural than control. I don't believe in, like, my nervous system goes ugh, ugh, to hierarchy. People who think that they're better or higher or more worthy, I just go, I feel so bad for you, because I know that you're hurting inside. That's how I see people who believe that hierarchies are worth the sauce that they have. Because I see that you're really missing something. I feel like you're missing something, because you're chasing after all these things that you think is going to bring you the actual thing that's actually living inside of you. You know what I mean? So that's just the way that I see it. And then the last reason that hierarchies disturb my soul, I just imagine another way of living, right? And I feel like I take pieces of it from history that I've read, from innate wisdom that I've have, from my own ancestors and ways of being in my own family and things of that nature. Like, what if society valued stewardship over ownership, right? Valued caring and sharing versus this is mine, or I control this. I control access to the water. I control access to the land. I control access to the power, right? Like, if instead of that, we said everyone has access, it's like by the people, for the people, that kind of energy, right? I liked the whole idea of, like, the creator economy, or, even like when rideshare was a first thing and it started being like, everyone was like helping each other and carpooling and things of that nature at one point. Like, when things are made by the people for the people, right? Why can't things be that way? You know what I mean? Cooperation over domination, right? Like, I think we would get a lot done a lot more quicker, and people would be a lot more happier if we actually cooperated with one another versus trying to dominate one another, right? Contribution over status, right? This thing of status symbol and how much money you've made is a signifier of your success. If I can tell you how many millionaires I've talked to, picked up, had conversations with, who are miserable AF. And not to say that all rich people are miserable. I'm not like harping on rich people. I have nothing against rich people. But in general, status symbols and achieving success does not mean that you're more happier, right? Like they say, more money, more problems per se, you know what I mean? It really just amplifies who you already are. So if you're a miserable MFer without money, you're probably going to be a miserable MFer with money, right? Like the core issue hasn't been solved, which is your internal access point to your soul, right? You know, and enough over endless accumulation, right? Why can't you have just enough over accumulation? Why are some of the happiest countries are some of the poorest countries, right? Why are some of the most happiest people on the planet? They have the least amount, because happiness is not found in the things of accumulation, of, extraction, exploitation. It's found within your soul, this that you are, right? Like I said, once you die, you can't take nothing with you. So like, anyways, and then what if leadership meant service instead of power, right? Instead of getting into leadership saying, oh, I'm going to, erect this thing in my name and have my name written on this thing because I'm the greatest. Total narcissism, right? Instead of, I'm going to go dominate this country and all this other stuff, right? Why can't we say, how can I make this a more amicable, pleasant planet to live on for everyone involved, not just myself, right? Like, so simple concepts. not I don't know, common sense isn't common on our planet. But yeah, so maybe that's why hierarchies have always disturbed my soul, all of these reasons, and not because I think everyone is identical, right? We're not. We're all different, right? But we are all the same in the fact that we're connected. We're interconnected. We are interdependent upon one another, whether we like it or not. You know what I mean? And because I believe every person has inherent dignity and inherent value and inherent worth, hierarchies just don't resonate for me. You know what I mean? They never have, probably never will. And yeah, I just feel like there is a different blueprint of living, that we can start to access if we could just start thinking more logically rather than, upside down. And, the moment that we start believing some people are fundamentally above others, we create a world, where exploitation becomes easier to justify, right? Which is what we see that's happening now, right? Taking away of rights, right? Shutting down, initiatives that were designed to create more equality and equity in the world, right? Shutting down access to healthcare, shutting down things that people need, right? And pushing up things because of other people's agendas. You're not caring about the human life that's on the planet, right? Vying for AI and, the who's going to control AI because human life is no longer valuable. We need to figure out how to replace humans because humans don't matter anymore kind of energy. That's the kind of direction that some parts of our society is going into, right? And so exploitation becomes easier to justify when we believe that, someone is better than the other or higher than the other, right? And I'd rather build a world rooted in reciprocity than domination, So yeah, I just believe in equality, equity. It's the womanism in me, the feminism in me. Like, I just believe that equity, equality for all, human rights is the way to go long term. You know what I mean? For future generations and the planet that we live in. So if this kind of conversation resonates with you and you want to dive more deeper into future quests and workshops and masterclasses around peeling back the layers of how this works out and really coming into your own, definitely join my Mosaic Souls World waitlist at mosaicsoulsworld.com, where I'm going to be diving more into this kind of stuff in future workshops and quests, and even through my art and music and things of that nature. Definitely this stuff is coming soon, so definitely sign up at mosaicsoulsworld.com. And as always, flow with what feels good and let go of what doesn't, because you are divine. You are a divine being, and your soul knows exactly what you've come to explore and experience while on this planet. So I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace, love, and light.